I was 24 years old. I worked as an app developer and had a loving girlfriend. She was probably the only reason things weren't going so great at the moment. My friends warned me about my girlfriend April, but I always waved away their complaints. I knew that she had a wild side. That was what drew me to her in the first place. April was impulsive and sometimes reckless, but I loved her, and it was always exciting being with her. One time, she called me to come to the hospital, and I got there to see that she had a cast on her arm. She said she missed the subway train and tried to get in by ramming herself on the glass. The force had sprained her arm. I had to pay the bills and also take care of her. I told her that normal people would have waited for another train or found an alternative way, but she stubbornly didn't listen to me. We had been dating for close to a year now, and aside from the time she would get us into trouble, nothing serious had ever happened. I asked her to move in with me because I thought I could keep her safe from herself. I was wrong. One of my apps that I put in for a bidding contest won, and April said we had to go celebrate. I was ecstatic and agreed with her. The contract was a good one for me, and I was going to be very rich. We went to a bar at the end of our street. We got a bottle of champagne and toasted to my success. It was nice being with her, and we talked about everything and laughed together. It was getting late, so we decided to go home. I stood up and bumped into someone behind me. The guy shoved me, and I had to grab the bar table for support. "Hey, watch it!" I finally got a good look at him. He was a big and muscular man. I swallowed nervously. April was pushing at the guy's chest, telling him he had to apologize. The other people at the bar just watched, probably hoping there would be a fight. No one came to intervene. "April, let it go," I said, grabbing her by her waist and pulling her back. I didn't want any trouble tonight, and this guy was the sort of people that we shouldn't be messing with. The excitement of tonight fizzled out, and all I wanted was to go back home. "Yeah, listen to your wimp of a boyfriend and get out," he said. What happened next happened so fast. One moment, April was beside me. The next one, she launched herself at the guy who insulted me and started slapping him. They were both on the floor, but April was on top of him. She punched him in the face, and the guy yelled. He tried to punch her back, but she dodged it. I guess only someone as crazy as my girlfriend would have learned to fight because of her tendencies to get into trouble. I pulled her off of him with great difficulty and yelled at her to stop. She struggled against me, but I managed to pull her out of the bar. The look on the guy's face chilled me to the bones, and I hoped this would be the end of it. On the way home, I scolded April and told her that she should think before she acted. Anything could have happened, and she could have been hurt. She shrugged it off and said that she just couldn't stand by when someone was insulting me. I shook my head in barely restrained anger. We got home eventually, and I went to the kitchen to get her ice for her hands. About an hour passed by, and I put the drama that happened behind me. We were in the living room watching a movie when I heard a sound that didn't come from the TV. I muted the movie and stood up. April watched me with wide eyes and asked me what was wrong. I told her that there was someone in the house. Suddenly, the lights went off. April screamed and held on to me. "Who's there?" I called out. "Did you think I would just let you go?" a voice said, chuckling. It was the guy April assaulted in the bar. I gulped and told April that we had to get out of the house. The guy looked pretty dangerous, and for him to break into our house, it meant something terrible would happen. April brought out her phone to call 911. The guy walked into the living room, a gun pointed at us. He motioned for her to end the call, and April had no choice but to do that. Then he asked us to get on our knees. We complied, and I kept thinking of a way out of this situation, but found none. April rammed into him, and he lost his grip on the gun. I reached for the gun and looked up to see that April was biting him. The guy screamed and cursed before punching her in the stomach. She fell down groaning. He looked at me and saw that I had the gun pointed at him. Perhaps he thought I wasn't going to pull the trigger because he started coming at me as if daring me to shoot him. I pulled the trigger at the same time our door got knocked down and uniformed men marched into the room. The guy was on the floor with a bullet hole in his shoulder. They restrained me first because I was the one with the gun. The guy started crying and said that I hurt his girlfriend and that I wanted to kill him. April was unconscious, so it was his word against mine. At least till she woke up. I was taken into detention, pending the time that April woke up. The next evening, I was released. The police said that April gave her statement and it was the same thing I told them. April was waiting outside for me and ran to hug me when I came out. I was silent till we got home. Then I told her that she should move her things out. I was breaking up with her. She dissolved in tears and told me that what happened would never happen again. I looked at her in pity and shook my head. It hurt me to break up with her, but I had no choice if I wanted to remain alive. She moved out, and I hoped that she would find someone that could protect her when I couldn't. I continued developing apps, and my friends would often tease me that I needed a girlfriend. I ignored them all. I wasn't on the market for trouble, and it would remain that way for a long time. I was sure I picked the perfect dress for that night when I looked at myself in the mirror and the brightest smile I had had in a while crept up to my face. The red gown hugged my body perfectly. I looked at my face in the mirror again and left the house. I met Kelvin about 2 months ago, and so far I couldn't say if it was just the new person trait or if we really connected on so many different levels. He was an amazing person also. Patient, kind, and always ready to listen. This was our second date. We both decided to take things slow because we had both recently left an abusive relationship. Taking things slow was relatively the next option for us. The restaurant was lively and full. It was a Saturday night. Everyone was probably out to have fun. Men and women were all mushy to each other, and as much as I knew that was a good part of a relationship, it was not my thing. I looked around to see Kelvin at the far end of the restaurant. I laughed at how much he was dressed also. He went all out. It was sweet that a guy could actually dress up that much for a date. It could mean something. He saw me and stood up as I approached. He gave me a peck on the cheek and told me I was beautiful. I smiled bashfully at him. The restaurant didn't have chairs where we had to sit opposite of each other. They probably thought it helped couples connect better, and truly, it did the trick. Few minutes passed after they had brought our food. We brought up conversations in the process of eating. Kelvin was surprisingly an interesting person. There was just something new about him that amazed me every time he brought them up. I was about to put another one of the fries in my mouth when I noticed something moving between my thighs. At first I thought it was just air because of the slit that was on the dress and ignored it, but it felt different the second time. And when I looked down, a pair of fingers were rubbing against my thighs. I looked up to see a pair of eyes that were full of lust. "What are you doing? We're in public. This is very wrong. You know that," I told him. "Natasha, just hold on, okay? We can do this anywhere," he said. I looked at him again to be sure I was with the right person. I had never seen that part of him before. If only he knew that it was one of the reasons I wanted to actually take things slow. I had a very high sexual urge. I was beginning to think he had the same thing as well with the way he was going. "Kelvin," I said in almost a whisper, even though I was enjoying what he was doing to me. I bit the bottom of my lips and I tried not to make any sound so that no one would know what was happening. "Kelvin, stop," I said quietly again. "No, don't stop. Continue," I thought to myself. A mischievous smile crept to his face like he was enjoying the kind of status he was putting me through. He stopped suddenly and sat up in the chair before looking at me. I couldn't stare back at him. My cheeks were all red. I was blushing so hard and was embarrassed at what just happened. "Let's go back to my place to continue what we started," Kelvin said, which I just nodded in response to. He winked at me before calling the waiter for the bill. When we got to his place, I was shocked as to how big and beautiful his place was. I had never been to a guy's house that was that organized. Everything was in place and exactly how they should be. The lights were also a good complement with the color that the house was painted with. The house also smelled like vanilla, just like him. It was perfect. If this was not the perfect place to get intimate with someone, I didn't know what else could be called perfection. He pulled me closer to himself, and his lips found their way to my lips. Kissing him was like a dream. I didn't want it to stop. I pressed my lips harder against his. His lips were too soft for me to reject them, and when he tried to pull away, I pulled him back to myself, hugging him tightly that told him that I wanted more of it. I thought we were taking it slow, he asked. This could be our definition of slow. I smiled sheepishly at him. He pulled me with him as he led me to another part of his house. The more we walked, the more I realized he probably had a thing for a perfect home. It was just too beautiful to ignore. He opened the door to what I guessed was his room, and before I could ask any questions, he pushed me to the bed. Rough, I like it, I said to him. He only smiled at me and didn't utter a word. He pulled off his clothes, leaving only his boxers on, and he lay beside me. I stared at the perfect body that was beside me. He just stood there in all his perfectness and beauty. Like what you see? He asked. He must have noticed that I was staring at him. Who wouldn't stare at that body? It was perfect. He pulled me closer to himself after I pulled off my dress also. I saw him looking at me like a predator that was ready to devour its prey. You're beautiful, he said. There was a knock on the door, and Kelvin and I frowned at each other before rushing to dress up. Kelvin opened the door and got shoved aside by someone I knew all too well. Matthew, my ex-boyfriend. Only God knew how Matthew found me. He was always overprotective in the relationship and didn't give me the freedom of going out with people. Matthew, like I said, it's over between us. Get out of here. He looked at me sternly before replying, I'll never let you go that easy. He dropped the bag he was holding and ran out of the house. I was scared, so when I went to check what was in the bag, I saw a small device that looked like a clock, and it had a timer on its face, and it was counting down. My face blanched. I yelled at Kelvin to get out of the house, and I grabbed my clothes and rushed out, hoping Kelvin was right behind me. Just as I got to the street, an explosion rocked the house and I got knocked flat on my face. I covered my head with my hands. Kelvin pulled me up, and we both turned to stare at the ruins of his house. As much as I liked Kelvin, I knew being with him was risky to him. I couldn't be safe till Matthew was locked behind bars. I let Kelvin hug me, and as he swore to me that he would keep me safe, tears fell from my face because I knew I had to leave him. You know the saying, money is the root of all evil? But I didn't quite get it until later in my life. Now, before I begin, a like and subscribe won't cost you anything, so go ahead, do it. You see, I grew up in a very healthy family. My father and his father before him held important government jobs. Actually, this tradition would go back even further. And my mother, well, she was very healthy herself before she and Dad got together. Being an only child, I was quite pampered, but they never let it get to my head. I even had several jobs when I was in high school, even though I didn't need them. I worked at a McDonald's, at a car wash, and at the zoo, more specifically at the ticket booth. Yeah, practically I was a normal kid and wasn't really interested in the vast amounts of money I had at my fingertips. Of course, we had a big house, nice cars, went on exotic vacations. Don't get me wrong, my mom and dad loved the nicer things in life. And as the years went on, the relationship between my parents got a little bit stale. Dad was busy with work, Mom was busy with her own company, and the two would rarely see each other. It got so bad that my dad slept in a different room in the house. I was 21 and it didn't affect me that much. By that time, I was already living on my own. I was attending college at the time when my parents decided to officiate their divorce. The process was quite simple. They were both on board, and it seemed that they still liked each other, but not in the sense of being a couple. Dad left Mom the house and bought another one in a different part of town. A couple of months passed, and one evening I received a phone call. "Hey, Matt, it's Dad." "Oh, hey, Dad. Is something wrong?" I asked. It was a little past 10 p.m., and I knew he would normally be asleep at that house. No, everything's fine. I want you to meet someone. What do you say, lunch tomorrow at our favorite spot?" I was a little bit perplexed, but without asking any more questions, I agreed to the lunch. He was thrilled. I could tell by the tone of his voice and the stuttering laugh he'd always let out. The next day, I arrived a little bit early at our favorite restaurant. I grabbed the usual table and I ordered a coffee. As I was scrolling on my phone, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I looked up, and there was my dad, "Hey," I said while getting up and giving him a hug. "Matt, this is Cindy." I looked to my left. A gorgeous girl was standing there, smiling from ear to ear. She was dressed in a tight red dress and black heels. She also had 2 gold earrings and a gold watch. I didn't know who she was. I stuck my hand out as I didn't want to be impolite. "Hey, I'm Matt." But as soon as I said those words, I was surprised by a big hug. "I heard so much about you. Your dad says you're an accomplished athlete. I can see that," Cindy said. I stuttered a bit, and then said that I'm not really that good, even though I was the star quarterback in high school, and the same in college. We all sat down. The girl seemed to be a couple of years older than me, so I didn't quite get it at first. But as soon as I saw them holding hands on the table, I realized that she hooked up with my dad. I didn't say anything, but I thought he'd lost his mind. She was way too young for him. Time went on, and it seemed that the relationship was getting serious. My mom didn't like her, of course, and she would tell me every chance she got. She knew the girl was a gold digger, but my dad was too blind to see it. They were together for about a year when tragedy struck. My dad got violently ill. Since he had cancer in a terminal stage, we all moved back into the old house so that he could be around his family. And Cindy moved in as well. While Dad was in bed, and me and my mom took care of him, she would walk around the house without a care in the world, ordering the maid to bring her drinks, and lounge until evening by the pool. She was enjoying her life, even though the man she said she loved was dying. My dad was a practical man, and ever since he knew he was sick, he created a will. "Matt, come here, please, and close the door," he said. I did just that. He told me that I was the sole heir to the family fortune, and my mom would receive a large chunk of it as well. But Cindy wasn't mentioned. As I opened the door to leave the room, I heard a thump in the hallway. I looked left and saw a pair of heels going around the corner. I knew it was Cindy, listening to this private conversation I had with my dad. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I got out of bed to get a glass of water. As I was walking, I heard a commotion in my dad's room. I quickly went inside and saw Cindy. She was right next to him, holding his hand with hers, guiding him to sign some sort of paper. "What the hell are you doing?" I yelled. She quickly put the paper away. I got closer, but she just stood up and left without any explanation. I saw that his medicine bottle was opened, and some of the pills were spilled on the nightstand. Dad was pretty out of it. I didn't make the connection right away, but now that I think about it, I know she him so that he could sign the inheritance to her. Good thing I caught her in the act. I still couldn't sleep, so I walked around the backyard for a bit to get some fresh air. And as I was doing that, I saw someone at my dad's window. I rushed upstairs. As I entered the room, he was all alone. I asked him if he was okay, but he was out due to the medication. Suddenly, the door closed behind me. I turned around and saw the baseball bat coming right for my head. I didn't have time to duck, so it hit me right in the temple. I fell to the floor, nearly losing consciousness. My vision was blurry, but I couldn't still see who it was. Cindy was holding the bat.
"I'm gonna make it look like you fell down the stairs, hit your head, and died. That way, every single penny goes to me," she said.
I struggled to find my words. "You're not in the will. You won't get anything." She laughed.
"How hard do you think it is to make a marriage certificate, Matt? Even without your dad's real signature, he'll be dead, and there wouldn't be a soul to say that the certificate isn't real,"
Cindy told me. That girl was pure evil. I couldn't believe what was happening. It seemed to be a scene from a movie. I finally got up from the floor, but as soon as I did, still being wobbly, she hit me again with the bat. This time she hit my back. I again fell, smashing my face on the hardwood floor.
"Die already so I can throw you down the stairs,"
she yelled. And that was her biggest mistake. Cindy came closer and was just about to smash my temple with the aluminum bat. Then, all of a sudden, she fell to the floor.
"Are you okay, Matt?"
Anna, our maid, asked me. She was holding a frying pan, and that's what she used to hit Cindy in the head. I was fine.
Immediately, I called the police, and they took this gold digger away. I was fortunate not to lose my life that night. And to show Anna my gratitude, I paid off her loan that she made in order to get an apartment. And my dad? Well, he didn't make it, unfortunately. He died a week after what happened, but I told him everything. On his dying bed, he told my mom that he was a fool, and she was the only woman he ever loved, before closing his eyes for one final time.
I'm always grateful to have found my wife. She completes me in every way, and I couldn't imagine life without her. But there was a time in my life when everything was quite different. I don't know if it's just me, but I've always been in a relationship. I can't remember a time when I was single for more than a couple of weeks. But the last relationship I had before I met my wife is one that scared me for the rest of my life, both physically and mentally. It all happened about 5 years ago. I was younger, more hopeful, and especially more trusting of people. And then Dana came into the picture. A beautiful, tall brunette with sparkling green eyes and a figure that almost anyone would envy. Yeah, she seemed perfect. We met at a coffee shop. She was in line behind me and we both wanted the same drink. That's when we started talking and one thing led to another. The two of us started dating, and everything seemed fine for the first 3 or 4 dates. But I found it strange that she never invited me over to her house. She'd been to my place many times, but every time I would walk her to her door, she would never ask me if I'd want to come in and spend a little bit more time together. We were both adults living on our own, so in my mind, I thought it was strange. One evening, as I was driving home from work, I decided to swing by her place and give her a giant bouquet of roses. I was right in front of her building and I called her. I didn't want to be this creep that just appears in front of her door. So as she picked up the phone, I asked her if she was home and if she was busy. "Oh no, I was actually just thinking of you," she said. I took that as a sign that it was okay for me to tell her that I'm downstairs. But as I did, she started to stutter. I'll talk to you tomorrow." And she hung up the phone. I didn't think that she was with someone else or anything similar. I actually didn't have any idea why she acted that way. But I didn't take it personally. I wasn't a controlling person by any means. But a couple of days later, I got a call from an unknown number. "Hello? Hello, is this Matt?" "Yes." "Dana's in the hospital. She got into a car accident." "Oh my God." "She's stable now. You were the only number she called for the past few months." The doctor then asked me if I could go over to her place and bring some stuff like pajamas and similar things. I went over to the hospital. Dana was still unconscious. I got her keys and drove immediately to her place. But as I opened the door, I couldn't believe my eyes. Pictures of me on the walls, melted candles all over the place, and a sort of shrine in the middle of her living room with another picture of me on top. There was also a small notebook under the picture, so I opened it. "On the 13th, our Lord and Savior will come to this earth and claim me as his own. This sacrifice will bring him joy and will allow me to join his kingdom in this life and the next." And the entire text had a blood stain on it. I looked around a bit more and saw that under one of my photos, a sharp, bloody knife was placed, and it had something written on the handle. "With this blade, I will sacrifice his life." I turned it on the other side, and it said simply, "Matt." Since she was hurt, I grabbed some of her things and dropped them off at the hospital. As I arrived, Dana woke up. She smiled at me, but I asked her about what was going on inside of her house. At that moment, she started acting crazy. She ripped out her IV and tried to jump on top of me so I couldn't leave. But her leg was injured, so she fell to the floor. Dana still managed to scratch my arm in her attempt to contain me, and even to this day I have that scar. "You don't understand! I need to sacrifice a pure soul! It's bigger than you and me, Matt! I have to do this!" she yelled. The nurses even came in to see what was going on. I left the hospital, and I could still hear her screaming a couple of floors down. I was out of there and never contacted her again. The worst part was that she even came to my house a couple of times, and I was forced to move out so she wouldn't find me. Unfortunately, that was the time I met my wife. And since then, I tried to forget what nearly happened to me.